Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Saturday lunchtime show with myself, Michael Wright, and Jen Hurst. Jen, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's been another busy and positive week. I'm doing well.
Excellent. Good to hear. It's been somewhat busy for me as well, but also somewhat quiet. Strangely enough, normally around about this time it gets a little bit busy. And welcome everyone to our show for this week. And apologies for last week when I joined in with the discussion on Sunday. Really important discussion about the the education secretary talking about how heads should be trained to talk to parents. It was a very, very engaging conversation, but unfortunately my device wasn't playing that day, so I was cutting out intermittently there. So apologies for those who are expecting that. So today, this will be very, very pertinent for those who have been aware of the comments by one Linda McAulay-Griffiths, I beg your pardon, about her views, shall we say, on the values of music education and her comments in regarding really music lessons as such. We're here to talk about that. We're going to be breaking down her comments specifically, but we're also, myself and Jen, we're also going to be discussing the value of not only music, but let's say creative arts, the arts in general. I think it's, for me, it stirred a point that I've heard majority of my teaching career, my career in education. I didn't hear it when I was a professional musician. And that point is of the value of music. What with the last decade and a half of all the changes that have happened in UK in regards to this, I can't but help feel like even Linda's comments, as we'll get to, perhaps if she didn't mean them in the way that they came out, I can't but help feel that perhaps that might be the sentiment that maybe a majority of people within education, the general public, might really feel about not only music, but the arts in general. So lots to unpack, lots to discuss. But before we go on, I do want to start, of course, with one of three of our wonderful sponsors for this show. Is brought to you by Hatchet Learning, in partnership with Hatchet Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit hatchetlearning.com to explore a full range of titles. Right, Jen, let's begin. So, Linda's comments, if I can read them out verbatim, because I think it's important to, first of all, for those who are unfamiliar with this topic, I think it's important to basically say what she said. Apologies for anyone watching from Scotland. There's Scottish vernacular in here, and if I'm getting the pronunciation wrong, then yeah, please let me know. So there was a meeting online, and she said she overheard employers were seeking young people on the tools. So I would imagine that to be going straight into apprenticeships, or at least that's what the news outlet says here. So she added to that, I'm really thinking about getting the weans right on the tool. And I presume weans mean children in this one. Again, if I've got that wrong, please do correct me. She goes on to say, there's a bit of me, and folk have heard from me before. I'm no really seeing the point of a ween knocking out 7 bells of a glockenspiel, but I will see about a ween knocking 7 bells out of tools. We need to make sure that we are maximizing young people's education. So it's that, for me, it's the last 2 points, really, Jen. What she's saying here, just reading from the quotes, is that she doesn't see the point of children learning an instrument, doesn't see the point of learning music. There's a devaluation of this, so just knocking 7 bells out of a glockenspiel, which implies to me that there isn't any skill involved. It's literally just here's your beta and just, go to town. As someone who's taught reception and year one music, glockenspiels, I can tell you now it can get it can get noisy, but it's certainly not wasn't part of my lesson plan that would just go in, just hit things. Anyway, it's caused loads and loads of backlash. We have award-winning percussionist Evelyn Glennie says that the comments were not only short-sighted, but a fundamental misunderstanding of what education is for. Fellow percussionist Callum Huggan also wrote, I find the comment not only insulting, but incredibly short-sighted. These words dismiss the dedication, skill, and potential of young musicians. To belittle the creative arts in any way, or in this way, I beg your pardon, is not only disrespectful, it is dangerous. Now, just obviously to say that, that's not to say that Linda didn't come out with some sort of apology. She did, and this is what, when I read this, it kind of made me think perhaps that the comments were taken out of context. I say this because the source that I'm reading from has Linda handing out an award for a Scottish young musician. So I wouldn't imagine someone of Linda's standing would say this, being so representative of Scottish music, and, perhaps it not being said in that way. So she did actually respond to the controversy, and she said the wording of my statement within the meeting was, and this is the meeting she was talking in, was in no way intended to devalue the currency of music education and activity. But I'm able to see how such a short clip may be taken as having a negative take on both the curricular positioning of music and its benefits for young people. And I apologize for this. I do not support this statement under this interpretation. It was a throwaway comment, which on reflection, I can see may have been misinterpreted, particularly when taking out of context. So, Jen.
Hi.
Hi. Hearing all of that, it was a very underhanded and very clumsy way of expressing perhaps what Linda wanted to say in terms of what she wants children in Scotland to be focusing on in education. She did apologise, but those comments essentially have caused quite a stir. How do you feel as a creative arts teacher, as someone who works within music education, and of course a musician, how do you feel when you just hear those comments just as they are?
That's an interesting question that you're asking me. How do I feel? When I saw this come up, for me, to answer your question specifically, it's not something that I'm taking on myself as, how can I put it, as being something that could be taken seriously. I suppose that's the best way I could put it. I can't take it seriously. The issue is, and that's because I speak to 20 years in the teaching profession. I know what I do every day. I know the amount of thought and effort that has to go into that. I think the challenge with this is that it's come from a director of education. And I think that being in that position of authority, thinking about leading education and the fact that you're speaking to families and children, but also professionals who are looking for leadership and guidance, and they're looking for what is of importance, what is seen to be of importance, the direction of travel, thinking about the future of education across the board, where music sits within that, and having known people and studied with people to a very high level that come from that part of the UK, I know historically it's not taken lightly. Music education has been taken very seriously in Scotland, and I've known some of the most outstanding musicians from Scotland. That might seem like a very general comment. I can only speak to my experience, okay? So I don't feel like it's something that can be taken as a serious comment. I really don't, because I just think, I think the challenge is you're in a position of authority. People are looking to you for guidance and leadership. So what you say really matters. But people say little colloquialisms, people make passing comments and light-hearted comments. The intention is for it to be light-hearted all the time. And also in this cancel culture world that we live in, people are really forgiven, and you know, things are taken so seriously, and I'm really driven, you know, a view can really be driven forward from the smallest of comment that someone can make. Therefore, the onus is on the speaker to really be considering what they're saying before they say it. Now, the next thing I'm going to say about that is glockenspiels and triangles. We all know, as music professionals, even the children will think they get access to a box of percussion. Oh, I'll take the triangle. I'll whack the triangle, because it's seen as, you know, in a classroom setting, it can be seen by children as, oh, a joke, that a light-hearted thing that I can go away and just hit. You can teach a child how to play a triangle to produce a beautiful sound. You can teach a child how to play a triangle properly. You could, you know, I take that over glockenspiel as the example, but the two things to me are like for like. Why I speak to that is because even adults, you know, in social circles, they'll laugh and joke about, you know, what it is to play a triangle, to play a glockenspiel. I think this it seems to me to have been a light-hearted statement, but it's come from the wrong person. How can you be the director of education and be speaking to music education in that way? It was never going to go down well. So I don't know how well I've articulated that. But that's what I think. I've seen commentary online. I've seen how some educators feel about it. And then I'm sure as we go through this show, we'll talk about actually the potential damage that has been done. Because although I'm leading with, I think this was coming from a light-hearted place, to try and be forgiving and to recognise that people make mistakes. People do. Actually, it's a weighty topic. It comes with real impact, but we'll speak to that as we go through.
Absolutely. I agree.
At AQA, we work with the UK's largest teacher network to shape the future of assessment. With teachers for students, we ask questions today that matter tomorrow.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles.
With you wholeheartedly on everything you said. Firstly, I'm with you on this one. It sounded to me like it was taken out of context, and it was taken to drum up interest and to drum up enough of a storm, if you will. Do I believe that Linda perhaps feels that way? Again, as I mentioned before, she hosts the Scottish Young Musicians Award. She's a director of education. No, absolutely not. And I agree with you in terms of it was a light-hearted throwaway comment. And again, words mean so much more when they're in print than they do in the context of what they're spoken, right? So I'm yet to see this particular footage if it's available. So I'm not going to cast any judgment on Linda. And it's important to know, everyone, that we're talking about these comments. And at some point, I'd like to send this chat to Linda, and I'd like to reach out to her just for her to get her point if she so wishes. But I agree with you. I don't take that particular comment on what she said seriously at all. And I generally think it was one of those ones where it's like, oops, sorry, my bad. But and as you mentioned, it does touch upon really the context of the comment. So regardless of whom has said it, the context of, does it matter? does creative arts education really matter? We've had two prominent musicians in the music education community, or at least music community, come out against it. So it goes to show you that if it wasn't such a big deal, they probably wouldn't have said anything. But I think it strikes at the nerve and the core of us musicians and or creative teachers, doesn't it? It's essentially something that we have been battling over years, is that your subject really, essentially, it doesn't matter. The core subjects matter. Your subject, it's soft, it's a bit lighthearted. Your subject, in the grand scheme of things, in terms of what students need, in terms of their education, doesn't really matter. There's something before I ask you about kind of unpacking all of this. It's a quote from Jeffrey Sharkey, and it's a wonderful quote, Jen. And what it does, I think it encapsulates everything about music education as a justification of it, but also it sets it up sets it up for value in terms of what it is. So he says multiple research studies undertaken internationally show that the multidimensional value of music education in improving well-being, social inclusion, strengthening literacy, numeracy, memory, and attention, building creativity, teamwork, discipline, resilience, and confidence, developing exactly the transferable skills employers identify as essential for a 21st century workforce. And if I may, Jen, I wanted to kind of mention that in particular because on one of the future topics, probably should have mentioned this off air, but one of the future topics I wanted to talk about was the role of creative arts and neurodiversity, but that's for another future topic on this one, because I think what he says is absolutely spot on in terms of what music really is. So Jen, why does Linda's comments, why do they strike a nerve in?
Yeah.
What is it about it that strikes a nerve?
So Jeffrey Sharkey, I'm not sure if you mentioned, he's the principal of the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. I'm not sure if you said what his role was, but he also stated that the comments about the glockenspiel, switching triangle, which was the comparative example that I gave, and I'm saying that not from my perspective, but from how it can be viewed. 20 years in the classroom, you hear those comments made all the time about instruments like that until you teach how it's to be used in context, etc., and to respect the instruments. And he actually commented, said that it was insulting, and that it kind of goes on to undermine us as professionals and as teachers and musicians. So I think that you asked me, why does it strike such a note with us as professionals? I think that we know that there's an uphill struggle within the arts at the moment. We know the damage that's been done by the EBAC. We know that there's increasingly only access to, we've spoken about this in a previous show, to extracurricular music making in terms of paid for instrumental lessons. We know there's increasingly limited access for all children, limited equitable access. It's becoming something that you can have if you can pay for it only. So amidst all of the backdrop there, stretched curriculum timetables, we know that the national plan suggested, or was it the model music curriculum perhaps, can't remember, one or both suggested an hour a week for music, so a dedicated hour for music a week in secondary schools, not on a carousel, specifically for music making. There's so much effort, passion, drive, hard work going into making this a sustainable future for music education, that at the end of the day, somebody in a position of authority coming out and just saying, you're just, whacking a glockenspiel, I'm paraphrasing, that wasn't the official quote, but you're whacking a glockenspiel, and there are actually more important things that you could be doing, to paraphrase. It's damaging. It's damaging. We're working so hard to continue to advocate for music. We're working so hard to advocate for the arts, to convince everybody else of the value of it. But if you just take something that's been in my mind, if you just take, you mentioned at the start in your intro, just the simple concept of running a creative session with children. It's not something you can just turn up and do without any thought. It's complex. Often children are incredibly excited about that opportunity out of their academic day to do something that's different, that taps into a different part of their brain, different part of their thinking, a different part of their process, gives them an opportunity to show a set of skills that they may not really be. There's opportunities to show creativity throughout the curriculum, but it's not always exposed by all teachers in all subjects. It's an opportunity for children to really show what they can create, come up with, manipulate, do themselves, take leadership with. And it's not something that's just easy to manage, actually. And that's just on the kind of the delivery side. So then you take the children through that process. And then on the other side, it's the outcomes. And without creativity, we wouldn't have some of the most amazing artifacts, systems, ways of doing things that we have. So creativity has a place across the board. And I think we want to be really careful about just diminishing the value of creativity. There's so much more. You know what I'm like, Mark. I could just go rattle on about this now. A bit further down, I'll come back to some research that I was reading recently that was talking about all of the professions that people go into, where they say there was some research recently I'll look for the reference, where people in the most high level professions say that music was a huge part of getting them to that point. Creativity was a huge part of getting them to that point. So we're not really we don't really need to be diminishing the importance, the value of creativity. That's what I'll say there.
Yeah, it's creativity in and on itself is a very rigorous, very demanding, intellectually and emotionally skill. And if we can teach that well to our students, we can foster their ability to be creative, to think on their feet, to think divergent thinking, and that was what was suggested in terms of the modern 21st century thought process, is that people do need to be very divergent. They need to be thinking about other avenues. They can't just go down one. Careers are not linear anymore. We're moving from one to the other. So we're living in an ever-changing age. At the beginning part of the 21st century. So creativity in any subjects or anything in school which can help, that is always going to be a tremendous asset to the workforce that we produce. Before I go on, I do want to read out another word from our sponsors, Chalk and Talk podcast. If you are looking for another great education podcast, check out Chalk and Talk with Anna Stoke. Anna is a passionate advocate for evidence-based math education for students of all ages. On her podcast, she talks about everything from effective teaching methods and how-to guides for teaching math facts to tips for evaluating research show claims. She brings on top-notch guests, educators, researchers, policymakers, and discusses issues that directly impact teachers and students. Chalk and Talk is for anyone interested in education. Do find it wherever you get your podcasts. So, the public and educational views on music or creative education. The official figures here, just from what we've uncovered, Jen, in terms of research for the show, 84% of young people say that music improves their mental health. So we've got that aspect that is seen to be taken care of. This is also in contrast of a decline in GCSE and A-level music participation. So we're, as much as it is helping on that aspect, we're still seeing a decline in GCSE and A-level music. I read somewhere this year that there was a massive drop in drama as well. please don't quote me on this, but I want to say figure around about 40-50%, whether that's GCSE or A level, but even so, very, very significant. You mentioned earlier on, Jen, about the equitable aspect of accessing, music education outside of the classroom, the cost, the lack of access, the curriculum pressures. And you mentioned about the National Plan for Music Education. All of this, I believe, over time, I think it starts to create a narrative with people. Do you think that the public's perception of music, do you see it positively? Do you think parents and policymakers, do you feel like music, drama, art, all of those creative subjects, do you feel like they still feel it has some value, or perhaps do Linda's comments really strike a notion that for a majority of people, well, it's actually true. I don't want my kid being an artist when they grow up. I want them to work as an engineer. What do you think? Do you think the public generally believe that, or do you reckon it's something else?
It's a really broad question, and I think that it really depends on your audience. So it depends on which portion of people you're speaking to. I, outside of teaching, I do so much around advocacy for music education, not in the sense of, hail me for all the things that I'm doing, but it's what I'm interested in. It's what I've been interested in throughout my career. And so I have the most interesting of conversations. I find myself in spaces where I'm around people who want to see more music in school curriculum, in communities, and with all partners working together. So I really think that depends on who you're speaking to. I don't think that parents undervalue music. I think that where we are is that it's a nice to have for a lot of families and young people. I think that because it's rightly so got to be paid for, I'm all for paying teachers fairly. Ultimately, people have got, the last few years have been very tight, haven't they, for most people? So people have got limited spends, they've got limited liquid cash that they can put into other things. And you've got to think really carefully about where you're going to spend that money. So just in terms of developing musical or vocal instrumental skills, is that where I can afford to put my money? Is that what I can afford to be spending on first and foremost? Then, obviously, in England, students have the right to have a Key Stage 3 music lesson once a week. It's happening in many places. In some places, it's still not quite as it's meant to be. In primary, it's part of the curriculum and part of the national curriculum also. So great, there's access in school. But in terms of careers, again, going on to future study, there's been such a kind of downgrading of arts and creative subjects within universities, to the point that earlier in the year there was a university, you'll remember the name of the university, Mike, I'm sure, that was under threat of closure in terms of the music programme. And so I just think across the board there's almost like a wholesale kind of diminishing in terms of how it's viewed and valued. I don't think that individual families don't think that music matters. The evidence to me doesn't suggest that adults think music doesn't matter to their child. Parents think music doesn't matter for their child. It's just whether it's the most important thing. And that's where we all have to pull together, because we know firsthand the value of music. And we want to see music continue to keep us as kind of like world leaders in the arts. We want to be leading the way, as we've done for so long. There's such great talent coming out of the UK, and we want to continue that happening. So I just think that anything that kind of suggests that it just doesn't matter is not helpful to the discussion. It's not helpful at all. And that doesn't necessarily feel to me, you may disagree, it doesn't necessarily feel to me like it's kind of like those comments don't feel to me like they're going along with the tide that they should be. I feel like it's pulling, for me, those comments pull away from what the messaging certainly should be. And, you know, all of the conversation that's been happening in England about the 88 million, all of the conversation that's been happening about all the great initiatives that are going to be happening, that comment just seems like an outlier to me. It doesn't seem to go with the tide of certainly where we're hoping to be heading in England.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning the 88 million pounds that was set aside from the government to be funding for extracurricular projects, including music. If I may plug, we happen to have spoken about that at length. So if you do happen to go through the archive of YouTube, you will see myself and Jen talking about that at length. I have quite a few people still who I'm in contact with in the music industry, and there's one particular friend of mine who I have disagreements with because he doesn't work in music education. He works in the top echelon of the music industry. Works for a very big label, record label, and I've had arguments with him about how the top end, the music industry, the industry which provides jobs, and you could substitute that for the film industry or the art industry. I have always said to him that music industry doesn't do enough to entice young people into its sector. It doesn't do enough in the form of pay, opportunities, pension, job security. If we, in the creative arts sector, if we really push, which we all do, we work incredibly hard to, but if we're pushing our students to do the very best they can, and they have an incredible talent in our area, it's only natural for us when they come to the point of leaving school to say, when you go to university, you could go to conservatoire, you could go to art college, you can go to wherever you want, but you go safe in the knowledge that, hey, there's a job for you afterwards. So if you do really, really well, there's going to be an incredible job waiting for you at this record label or this art gallery or whatever it is, or this film company. But there isn't. The pool is shrinking, certainly in the UK. And I just think it's a trickle down effect. I think from the top end, if there was an industry which were willing and open for more creative minds to come in and get their apprenticeships and get their knowledge and work within a sustainable industry, I don't think you and I would even be having this conversation. I don't really even think Linda's comments would exist, because it would just be a given, because there's a strong industry to go to. It's with feeding young talent, so to speak, into this. But because there isn't, because of the precariousness of the creative arts industry, because of its historical problems trying to get a job. I'm not talking about an artist getting a publishing deal or a record deal. I'm just talking about anyone trying to work in. I think it just hasn't been an avenue, and it hasn't been something where a graduate could leave and go, oh, I'm going to get a job in the industry. I've got, saddled with all this student debt. I'm going to get a job that will pay it off in X amount of years. When I left conservatoire, I left with, a big amount of student loan, which I'm still paying. But I didn't go into a job. I didn't go to a gig straight away. I was, like the rest of the graduates, trying to find and claw my way into something that probably didn't exist. Or if I did get something, it was so poorly paid, or it represented such a poor return of investment in terms of the stuff that I've done. There were times in my professional career I felt incredibly discouraged, because I thought, at least with the effort I put in, I could at least work in an industry that's going to put food on my table, or, dare I say, save up, buy a house and put something in for pension, really. So I am again in agreement with your comments, and I just feel like the top end, the things outside of our control of music education or creative arts education, I think they need to do a lot better to entice young talent in, because once you've got that in, you've got value, because In the Western world, we value music and monetary gains. We value it by sales, by how much was sold, how many people have come to our concert. We're not necessarily historically a culture where we value the arts in terms of what it does to us, to our communities, how we use it to celebrate cultural norms and what we do. We're very much how many records have you sold of that? Do you know what I mean? So I think the top end music industry definitely needs to do more in regards to that one. Okay, moving on then. There was something that I found in terms of the research, Jen, and you mentioned it too, about the justifications of music. And I mentioned one of the quotes, forgot is it Simon? Is it the conductor's name is Simon? Yes. He spoke, first of all, he talked about all the great things for literacy, numeracy, but he put right on top of their well-being. And so it should. But from my research, from my master's program, I found an amazing source of material talking about hard and soft justifications of music. And again, we can substitute music for something else. And it made me rethink music and the creative arts in a way that I hadn't thought about. And it's the first time in my career I thought about the creative arts being what the author described as a hard justification. So a justification for academic means, for libertarian means, as opposed to a holistic means. And it really stuck with me, because the messaging I've had prior to that one was all about music's role in well-being and in mental health. There was a big thing, sing for pleasure, and everything about it was, it lifts us up, it lifts our spirits up, and it does. The creative arts do that in abundance, and not just singing. If you were to go to a life drawing class and you're into art, it does stir something in us, And I love amateur dramatics, and I've taken part in a few of them. I love the idea of being on stage and just expressing a character. It's absolutely amazing. But this author not only justifies music in the curriculum as a unique form of knowledge and expression, he also sees it as a model for social justice and inclusion, for cultural representation, for one to kind of, to a better terms, not better their means, but kind of climb up the social status. There's also the knowledge itself and the epistemology behind that one about music itself. The knowledge of knowing music and learning music itself is quite in depth, as well as the genres and traditions that one studies within music. How do you view music from your side in terms of what you teach, your philosophy? When you teach music, are you thinking about, say, the softer justifications of music education, or are you thinking about its importance for literacy, for numeracy, for the academia side? What's your view, or ethics, if you will, on that?
Education is holistic, isn't it? A holistic approach to education is for me the right one. So if you think about literacy skills run through every subject, and the literacy of music is really important in terms of just not only understanding music in terms of how you're communicating with one another about it, but in terms of accessing the exams as they currently are. We know that young people are not going to be able to access the best grades in music in a music education, in a music course, like an academic music course such as a GCSE in music, to be specific. They're not going to access the highest grades in a GCSE or A level in music unless they have the literacy for it, right? And so that is just a fact. That's just a fact. And if you flip it, in other subject areas, like I've mentioned earlier, the creative skills matter 100% across the board. So I think, I just think for me, it's about the holistic approach to it. Music involves huge amounts of counting, so the numeracy comes into it there. You've got to expose all of that to the children. You've got to explain to them everything that you're trying to get across to them, and why all elements of music as a subject matter, or in fact any creative arts subject. So I think a holistic approach is the one that I believe in. And just in generally speaking, you're asking me how I teach music. It's interesting. I guess that's something that it develops as your career develops. It develops over time, and it develops in terms of what you're doing. So I don't only teach in a secondary setting, but I teach very small children as well in another setting. And I think even myself as a practitioner, I'm learning all the time about the intricacies of delivering music with very young children, because there's so much play involved in how they learn when they're younger. So it's about the joy and the love of the engagement in music and the engagement with music. And again, I'm so pleased to see how much student-led learning is becoming higher on the agenda of music making. So the stuff that I do with trainee teachers of music, PGC undergraduates, there's so much for them about, again, encouraging young people to lead and to feed into what it is we're going to teach them. Yes, we have our curriculum, but music can be broadly interpreted. So what's going to be of interest to the children? Might that look different in different parts of the country? Might that look different for children of different ages? Are we even asking them what they're interested in? It's gone from, this is the curriculum that you'll teach, deliver the curriculum, to how can we really interpret this in the best way to engage as many learners as possible and really foster a love for music. So for me, it's a holistic approach, and my philosophy on teaching, I suppose, if I have one, is always evolving, and it's becoming now a lot more student-led and student-focused, because that for me is the way that you do create lifelong learners of music, and people with a lifelong passion for music, is by connecting with them in terms of their interests.
Yeah, and that in itself also inherently brings value, doesn't it? So when one has a vested interest in what they're learning and what they're doing, they therefore have a value straight away. The values of your classroom and my classroom, in terms of the numbers, the individuals that we teach, will differ. And that's the skill of an educator, of a teacher, to understand that each one of the people we have in the classroom has their own values of why they want to learn. Or in some cases, if they don't want to learn, it's about understanding why they don't want to learn, and then in a way finding out a little bit about them in terms of what interests them, to realign their values in what they do. It's absolutely spot on. I think majority of anyone who teaches the creative arts or creative subjects, there is going to be a big dollop of holistic teaching and holistic pedagogy involved in that. I mean, I don't know. I'm yet to meet a maths teacher who teaches in the same way as a music teacher does, but I'm sure they are there, because I think there's a lot of connection between music and maths, certainly in the way that they approach them. It's interesting. I started my career very much like that, and then I think as I've got older, I've also seen the value of musical literacy and musical vocabulary. It was and still is a big thing to see my students being able to perform something to the best of their ability. I've opened that now to improvising, so they're able to embellish and create. So for me, my value of that would be, here's the material, you can play it as you want on the sheet, but there's nothing wrong with you if you change a few things here or there, provided you change it within the parameters, that's okay. But I've also started to see the value in musical vocabulary. So for not only do I want my students to perform, I would also want them to tell me in the best possible way afterwards what they did, and do that using musical vocabulary. I guess if it's an art teacher, it'd be the same thing. You've created a pop art piece in the style of Andy Warhol, for example. Okay, now tell me the process. What did you do? How did you get from this here to this, and what techniques did you do? Because it's also important as well, and we all forget this too as well. In terms of academic music in schools, there's 1/3 of the proportion of students GCSE, if they're doing, say, exam board, not vocational, is listening and appraising, so they have to do an exam. So there's a part of me as well that wants my students to articulate to the best possible way what they're doing in addition to doing it themselves. It is a fine art to balance, because doing and thinking are completely different, takes complete different real estate in our thinking. When you're doing, you have to kind of switch off the logical and rational part because you're focused on doing. But when you're not doing, then you need to think about it. And it's that. But that's the great thing I think about creative arts, is that you are constantly flipping between the two. So you're developing two sides of your cognitive approach to thinking. And subjects like music provide a plethora of opportunities for these. It's great if students were to play something amazing, but if I say to them, okay, can you tell me what key signature are we in, or what time signature are we in, or tell me about that first phrase, and if they can't even do that, then for me that's just as much of a worry than it is if they couldn't do it. So it's important, isn't it, for one's values to really, well, first of all, align with your students, but also it's important for one's values to align with yourself, if that's not being too cliche. The minute that you start to lose touch of values, or if we're tying it to the conversation here, the minute we start to let the outside noise and all of the people talk differently about our values, then it becomes harder. It becomes harder, like you said at the beginning, the pressures of EBAC and all these pressures about funding. And for any heads or SLT listening out there, I absolutely completely sympathize with those who are on a budget and they go, right, I've got X amount of money and I need to allocate it, and I just cannot allocate it anymore to, let's say, the creative arts, because if I do that, then I don't have this. It's that old proverbial pulling your blanket's too short, isn't it? So it's pulling out over your head, but then your feet are cold and you pull it down towards your feet, but your head is cold, It's real, I get it, budgets are incredibly tight. But like you said, Jen, at the end, it's working within those hardships. But I mean, values don't cost anything, do they? They don't cost anything to have. Vision, yes, absolutely. But in terms of your core values of what you want to do as an educator, or if you're a student, your values are what you want to be as a person and how you see the creative arts subjects doing that. There's no price. There's no price to that one. But maybe I'm thinking a little bit more optimistically, because I'm certainly one who was determined enough to make it work, because I didn't have particular factors around me to make it work. So I put music's value very, very highly in there. But that's, again, I'm speaking probably more for myself there. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, I just.
At AQA, we work with the UK's largest teacher network to shape the future of assessment. With teachers for students, we ask questions today that matter tomorrow.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles.
Just listening to all the things you're saying, I love the fact that you're talking about actually working for real in industry, in the music industry or the creative arts sector. And look, I just going back to what this show, where we started with this show, the comment that was made was just ill thought out. It would have been a passing comment that would have been made, but it was ill thought out. And I think that everything that we can do to keep a respect for music, for the arts, for creativity, all of that has to it has to come through. We have to do everything, especially people who are speaking about the future of education, you know, for for a whole a very large mass of people. You know, you've got to be thinking about the importance of what you're saying before you say it, and you've got to really mistakes happen. I'm not saying it wasn't an error, it wasn't just a misjudged comment, but I'm just saying that the future of music, we're in an AI era now, the future of music is changing, it's evolving, because AI can do so much of what is currently done by people, and ultimately people do feel threatened. The people that actually write music, the people that want to protect their IP, you know, their intellectual property, they are worried about someone just sitting at a computer and just having AI create something and it becomes theme music for a TV show. You know, people are worried about those things. They want to actually be making a real living from music making, and all of that starts either in their home or in their classroom, right? Or in their music room. All of that connects back to education on some level. Now, whether they felt they had a good music education or not, they probably still had some access to some equipment and whatnot that helped them on that journey that they're on, or they access music at a much higher level of education. Now, the point I'm making is, I love to hear you talking about industry as someone who went out of studying straight into teaching. So that was I did some playing at the very start of that journey, but ultimately that the route that you've taken is not the route that I've taken. I've gone out of education straight back into education, but for people that are going to go and actually be performing musicians, they're going to be creators of music, that isn't going anywhere. There's a huge amount of talent in this country, and at the end of the day, we cannot diminish the value of those people, their skills, their creativity, and those that are going to come after us. And that's really what it's about, because I don't want a future where AI is doing all of the work. I want real music made by real people. The joy that comes from music making, the joy that comes from ensemble music making, a big passion of mine, when you get together and play with other people, that's largely what music is about, really. And so we're not going to just sit here and reduce it to you banging on a glockenspiel. No, there's actually future here for many people to continue putting however many billions it was at the last count, 66 billion or whatever it was, into the UK economy. I've plucked that figure out of the air, but I feel like a couple of years ago that was a statistic I looked at. So much money goes into the UK economy from music making. You know, can we just pause for a minute and recognise that this isn't going anywhere, so let's just protect it. It's not going to go anywhere. There's going to be a future generation of fantastic music makers. When we had the pandemic, is another thing that I was thinking about. What was the thing that people turned to? People turned to music to support one another and support themselves, and music online was a huge way that people were able to still connect. The tiny desk performances, you know, the YouTube shows that people were able to watch to encourage themselves. So this is not going anywhere. The value of music isn't going anywhere, and I just think a little bit of thought to help us along the journey to keep it in its rightful place is what is needed. But I don't believe that people just don't value music. I just think that accessing music is the challenge. I think that accessing it is the challenge, and that's not what this show is about, but that's a wider challenge that we have to keep advocating for.
Yeah, absolutely. Spot on as usual. Before we close the show, a couple of words from our sponsors here. Firstly, AQA. They definitely know that the teachers are the real experts in the classroom. That's why they work closely with teachers just like you, combining your insight with their assessment expertise to create resources, tools, training, guidance that generally make a difference. They are the UK's most chosen assessment organisation, so chances are you already know their work. And as we head into a new school year, AQA are focused on helping teachers feel supported and ready. If you want to find out more about how they're working with teachers like you, just head to their websites or search AQA. We work with the experts. And in addition to that, Hatchet Learning, as I've mentioned at the beginning of the show, we are we bring the show to you in partnership with Hatchet Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit hatchetlearning.com to explore the full range of titles. So, closing insights this way. It's been a wonderful discussion about this. I have thoroughly enjoyed talking about this. I'm quite happy that we're able to take the comments out of context here, because yes, we understand they're clumsy. Yes, what Linda said was absolutely clumsy, and yes, it can be misconstrued as negative towards music, not only in Scotland. I mean, Jen, you're absolutely spot on. The Scottish music education and Scottish music scene is absolutely incredible. They have got it right, whilst England have probably got it wrong in some aspects. I think Scotland have got it right consistently. Yeah, my opinion, everyone, my opinion. But Scotland have consistently got it right, and I've heard so many great things. I've seen so many great artistic work, actors, actresses, music. They just seem to get it right. And for these comments to come out, I mean, a friend of mine did message me before the show, and she said, "Oh, you sure about this one?" I said, "Well, yeah." And she expressed a little bit of a cheeky surprise about this. But yeah, the context certainly. I can personally see those taken out of context. I don't know about you, Jen, but I also think that, perhaps there was not a truth, but perhaps there was a grain of us as music educators and creative educators. That's something that we deal with. But if you would, Jen, just to kind of close out the show, because you've spoken so well on this, your thoughts moving forward. I mean, you mentioned about coming together. Music's not going to go away. Is there anyone listening to this who's perhaps feeling a little bit of their own discouragement about creative arts, and they're feeling a little bit low? Is there anything you could probably say to any listeners there in maybe a minute or two, just to basically say, hey, look, it's all good, don't worry about it, everything's fine?
One thing I'm going to do is correct my statistic just now of 66 billion. Let's try 6 billion, but it's still a lot of billions of pounds.
Yeah.
Just checked up on that one. So more like £6 billion contributing to the UK economy each year. Look, there's a great future for music ahead and music making, because there are hugely talented people out there. I like what you mentioned just now about the grain of truth, because actually that comment, though we are contextualizing it as a misstep, and it has been acknowledged to be such. Actually, you don't just say things for no reason. So it's really important that people understand how much hard work is going on and how much young people deserve a right to a strong music education that has historically been the case, and that contributes so richly to the world of music. That isn't going to go away. Music educators and all educators of creative subjects be encouraged. And I do believe that parents and adults value the arts and value music. I just think that what we need to do is improve access to music. I think we need to improve access, equitable access for everybody, and that'll be setting things in the right direction. We also need to do something about, maybe we'll speak about this on a future show. I know time's running out, but maybe we'll speak on a future show about the bursary that's just been taken away from music educators. That's one for another show coming up. The top end is where the work needs to be done, and the initial access to music. That's what we need to be thinking about.
Yeah, Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that bursary, and in many ways we could tie it in with the value, because we talk about the value of music education, we talk about the £88 million that the government have given, but then on the other hand, they're not providing bursaries for ITT music, potential music teachers. So that talent we were talking about, that the people that want to that leave music school, music conservatoire, whatever you want to call it, they leave. They want to go in to be an educator, but perhaps they don't have the financial means because it's very expensive, in terms of studying postgrad. Now they've had one of those aspects taken away from them. So it's almost, feels to me like mixed messages, really, in a way. But yeah, you're quite right. That's definitely another topic.
Agreed.
For another day. Just before we close the show, I just want to give a shout out to AQA again. As I mentioned before, they know that we are the real experts in the classroom, and they're combining their assessment expertise to create resources, tools, training and guidance that really do make a difference. They're the UK's most chosen assessment organisation, so chances are you definitely know their work. AQA are focused on helping teachers to feel supported and ready. If you want to find out anything more about the work that AQA can do for you, please head to their website or just search AQA We Work with the Experts. Jen, thank you so much. It's been a brilliant chat. I'm really, really happy that we had the chance to speak, and I knew you'd have so much to say on it. And it's been thank you so much for people who are watching live. This is going to be saved on our YouTube channels and on that aspect. So please look at the Teachers Talk Radio YouTube channel to see not only this show but other shows. If there's any ones that you've missed out over the last couple of weeks, there's been some amazing topics. So please go and view those out. And of course, we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. So from myself and Jen, have a lovely Saturday, and we'll see you in a couple.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.